and welcome to Jay Coletti's Racket Reviews and Merry Christmas. My name is Jay Coletti and I will be your hostess. Here on Racket Reviews, we are dedicated to learning about all things organized crime, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion today about the Christmas Eve Massacre of 1919. It is that time of year where we wish each other Merry Christmas and encourage one another to have a cup of cheer. That's not the type of story that I have in mind for you today. Instead of cups of cheer, we're going to be talking about glasses of poison, and instead of goodwill toward men, we're going to be talking about a string of murders. Sound fun? We have a lot to discuss today, so let's get right to it. 101 years ago, people were anticipating their Christmas celebrations, much like you probably are. In addition to being the Eve of Christmas, however, it was also the Eve of Prohibition. The fight for prohibition had gone on for many years, and now the legislation was in place to be implemented just a couple weeks into the new year. The 18th Amendment was ratified on January 19, 1919, to go into effect 1 year later on January 17, 1920, officially banning the manufacturing, sale, and transportation of intoxicating substances in the United States. This essentially gave the mafia and any other criminal a year to get their processes in place to profit from the illegal production, sale, and distribution of alcohol. Christmas of 1919 would be effectively the last call for many people in the United States. Of course, you'll probably think of names such as Capone or Luciano as men who stepped up to take advantage of this system, and they did. But a name that you have probably never heard of before is John Romanelli. Romanelli was an undertaker and the mayor of Brooklyn's Little Italy. He was known as King John. He was also connected to Cosa Nostra, and for many years police suspected that he was used to discreetly dispose of bodies for the mob. It is most likely that his alliance aligned with the Genovese family, as his nephew Michael Abettemarco, who worked under Frankie Yale of the Genovese family, would be gunned down in a mob fight in 1928, a precursor to the Castellamarese War. Abettemarco's uncle, Romanelli, would arrange an elaborate funeral for him. His coffin was made of silvered bronze and was estimated to have cost between $6,000 to $10,000. The funeral procession included over 100 cars and 14 flower cars. Before we can move forward with the story, I have to take you back to August 7th, 1915. On this day, Tony Studo, an 8-year-old boy who was playing with his friends along the Gowanus Canal, fell into the river and drowned. Many of the bricklayers who had been working along the canal dove in to save him, but it was too late. John Romanelli and another undertaker, Gaetano Mangino, were soon on the scene. After the body was recovered, the family of Tony Studo gave the body to Gaetano Mangino to be the boy's undertaker. This infuriated Romanelli, so much so that he spent that whole night gathering his men to go take out Mangino. When Mangino caught word of this, he gathered up his own men and met Romanelli and his men on the corner to hash it out. Reports claim that at least 150 men took part in the shootout, with a crowd of thousands watching and 100 shots ringing out from this fight. After the police forced their way through the huge crowd, they found many men still sniping at one another, with both Mangino and Romanelli shot. Romanelli received a gunshot wound to the side and survived. Mangino was not as lucky. He had been shot in the stomach and in the side, in addition to having been stabbed twice. He would not survive his injuries. Romanelli never served time for this incident, but would receive a $25 fine for carrying an illegal weapon. That story is interesting enough, a shootout between two undertakers over the body of an 8-year-old boy, but it gets so much worse. Fast forward to the end of the year in 1919. Prohibition looms, and many people are trying to get in that last drink before they are either never to drink again or have to break constitutional precedent to do so. You also have a mobbed-up mortician who wants to get in on the enormous business that will soon be illegal booze. Months before, Romanelli had lost his undertaking license by the health commissioner who deemed him unfit to conduct the burial of deceased persons. Romanelli tried to fight this, but the determination from the commissioner remained. Romanelli turned to illegal alcohol and his connections to the criminal underworld. The only problem for Romanelli is that he didn't have access to grain alcohol, but he did know about a shipment of wood alcohol leaving New York for London. Wood alcohol, also known as methanol or methyl alcohol, was a key ingredient in embalming fluid. It was also extremely poisonous. The symptoms of wood alcohol poisoning are as follows: persistent, violent vomiting, and severe pain in the upper abdomen. Then loss of vision, rapid, heavy breathing, a weakened pulse, a coldness in the extremities, followed by death. Romanelli and his accomplices snuck into the warehouse where the shipment was prepared for Europe and took 1,500 gallons of methanol on December 20th, 1919. They drained the barrels into casks, refilling the barrels with water and returning them to the warehouse. Then the story goes one of two ways. Either Romanelli and his associates, with the help of druggist Samuel K. Salesby, mixed in the food coloring, water, burnt sugar, and flavor extracts, poured the liquid into whiskey bottles, and slapped on a fake label, and sold them to a man named Carmine Licencia, or they sold the casks of alcohol directly to Licencia, who with the help of Salesby prepared them and put them in bottles, put on the fake labels, and shipped them down the Connecticut River. I tend to lean toward the latter. In any case, Licencia, who was described as burly and swarthy, with heavy black hair and a black mustache, distributed the deadly whiskey all across New England via the Connecticut River, and by Christmas Eve, people were dying after drinking the alcohol or having severe symptoms such as blindness. All known victims were either in Connecticut or Massachusetts. Word spread fast about the alcohol, and by December 28th, police had arrested Romanelli and his associates in New York with the illegal alcohol in hand. Romanelli said upon his arrest, "I am glad you caught me. I will tell you all I know, but for God's sake, don't send me to Connecticut. I don't want to be lynched. My name has been published in all the papers, and it would mean certain death." Prosecutors in Connecticut and Massachusetts charged Romanelli with murder, but because of the extradition laws in 1919, Romanelli was charged in New York, but could only be charged with grand larceny or criminally receiving stolen goods, which were the crimes that he committed in New York City. He could not be charged with murder that took place out of the state. So he was charged with grand larceny and sentenced to 3 years. Following his conviction, Romanelli said, "I am ruined. I was innocent, but they framed me. The newspapers all knocked me, and everybody knocked me. They wanted to get me, and they didn't give me a fair show. I don't care so much about what happens to me, but what is to become of my family? I got 13 kids, and another one is expected." According to the New York Times, the authorities have not been able to trace the wood alcohol further than Romanelli. It is known that undertakers use wood alcohol in embalming fluid and have a license issued by the Collector of Internal Revenue to make purchases of wood alcohol in connection to their business. Romanelli would spend 2 years in the Sing Sing Correctional Facility until he was released on good behavior and returned to the funeral business. Many point to Romanelli's mafia connections to account for such a short sentence, but in this case it does seem that the extradition laws of the time are what secured the light sentence for whom H.B. Dobbs, the federal agent, claimed was the kingpin of this entire operation. After Romanelli's release, the prosecutor for the case, Herbert N. Warbass, said, "A man may stand within the confines of one state and fire a cannon into another, killing 1,000 persons without laying himself liable to extradition to the state in which the deaths actually occur. This is exactly what happened in the Romanelli case, except that the Brooklyn killers used wood alcohol instead of a cannon." Licencia, for his part in the crime, was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and sentenced to 18.5 years in jail. While on bail, however, Licencia fled to Italy, but would be caught 9 years later while living in Montreal. Now, I do have to give a slight defense for Romanelli. In 1919, the effects of wood alcohol were not widely known. In fact, as far as Romanelli was concerned, if this got people inebriated, then who cares if it wasn't real whiskey? The Journal of American Medical Association had very recently put out information outlining adverse effects of consuming methanol, but Romanelli did not have a subscription to the Journal of the American Medical Association and did not intentionally murder over 100 people. I also don't believe that he was an enterprising mastermind in all of this. I believe he thought this was a quick way to make cash, but it turned into a horrendous crime that got way out of hand. I wanted to tell you another quick story before I let you go today. Later in Prohibition, when the US government realized that people were not obeying the 18th Amendment, federal officials actually ordered for the poisoning of industrial alcohol that was being produced in the United States, that was regularly stolen by bootleggers. By the mid-1920s, some 60 million gallons of industrial alcohol were stolen annually. They wanted to scare citizens into sobriety, and they did this by mixing ingredients into the alcohol to make it undrinkable, including methanol, a process called denaturing. Savvy bootleggers even had to put renaturing chemists in place to make the stolen alcohol potable again. This had disastrous effects that far exceeded Romanelli's crimes. In fact, by the end of Prohibition, it is estimated that 10,000 people had died as a result of this operation. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Racket Reviews talking about the Christmas Eve Massacre of 1919, and I hope that I have not deterred you from having a cup of cheer for yourself. I look forward to our next discussion and wish you all a very Merry Christmas. Buon Natale. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click notifications to get more Mafia content sent directly to your sub box. Ciao.